These are dark, dark days for that great noble cause of free speech, and particularly that sacred right that our ancestors fought for at such cost and such sacrifice, even in some cases losing their lives for it. For men to be able to use broadcasting platforms to discuss whether they'd shag female journalists they disagree with. Free speech, which, as we now know, means being able to be as unpleasant as you want without suffering any accountability or adverse personal consequences of any description, that is under attack. And if there was a plucky but courageous knight fighting to preserve this precious and indeed ancient liberty, it was GB News. But our knight's sword has gone rusty, and the helmet's malfunctioned. It's kind of got caught on his lip, so he can't speak out. He's been silenced. And he's been thrown off his horse, and now the woke hyenas have caused a big stampede of wildebeests. And well, if you will forgive me jumping around with these metaphors, let's put it this way, Mustafa is in a lot of trouble. Now, let's take a moment. Let's take a moment to remember our fallen martyrs. The first free speech martyr of our time, forced to join the angels in cancelled heaven, was Lawrence Fox. You can't even misogynistically harass a female journalist on national television these days without even your own side going, what the hell are you doing? Then brave Dan Wootton, who'd managed to weather the indignity of multiple allegations sourced by multiple people against him, which he denies. For example, anonymously catfishing colleagues to secure sexual images of them. And now he's been suspended from his job. A job dedicated to spreading joy and goodwill to the world, simply for the crime of laughing along with what he himself described as offensive and misogynistic comments, which he clearly failed to challenge, then publicly claiming he was in no way amused by the comments until Lawrence Fox published a screenshot of their text indicating Wootton had actually found it hilarious. And then you get all these backseat pedants getting all pernickety and saying, well, you know, technically that would suggest Wootton was lying through his teeth. Now, some might well go, look, our plucky little soldiers are throwing each other under the bus here willy-nilly. There'd be maybe some more dignity if some particularly aggrieved ferrets were taking lumps out of each other in a sack. And yes, people might be throwing around glib little phrases like, where's the popcorn? I hope they finish each other off. Ha, 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 ha. But as anyone who has been into battle can testify, and Lawrence knows what it's like to struggle. He's been on those mean, ugly playgrounds of Harrow. After all, when those swords are thrashing around, sometimes you end up lopping off the heads of your key allies. Anyway, losing Fox was tough. It was hard. It was hard for all of us. And I should say, for those affected by these events, there will be a helpline offering emotional support at this very difficult time. But losing Wootton, that cut deep. Those with a deranged fixation with Meghan Markle are underserved by the British media as is. But if you told me last week they'd take Calvin Robinson out, not Calvin. To paraphrase someone I often look to for wisdom in these dark days, Senator Padme Amidala in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So this is how freedom dies, with someone who isn't actually a real vicar and is essentially wearing fancy dress on national television while expecting us to take him seriously, but let's not kink shame, being suspended. Now, as someone who is actually apparently a priest on Twitter, has apparently unironically posted, in response to Calvin sharing his devastating news about his suspension, rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Thus they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And Calvin responded, Amen. And now it is clear he sees himself as a glorious martyr. And I know some people are like, well, that's kind of offensive because real martyrs are people thrown in jail and tortured and even murdered by authoritarian regimes because they want things like free elections, rather than people in a right-wing channel who have chosen to die on a hill called sexually denigrating female journalists you don't agree with on national television. But let history be the judge. Now, the woke tyranny at GB News clearly decided to off Calvin because he declared his solidarity with Dan Wootton, declaring that their bosses were scared afraid of Ofcom, afraid of the woke mob, and afraid they're going to run out of money unless they manage to sort the advertising problem out. But he made also some other very serious points. He said, standing up for Dan is standing up for the very idea of GB News. And I cannot emphasize how much I unironically agree with that. He also says, if he falls, we all fall. Oh no, not that. Please, not that. He also discussed the careerist, ambitious ones who are currently gunning for his job. These people are worse than the woke mob because these vultures are giving the mob ammunition and essentially escalating the channel's demise. Now, fallen martyr Lawrence Fox too has been furiously denouncing his erstwhile colleagues, denouncing GB News as toxic, and I have to say, it really does sound like a surprising amount of consensus is emerging here. But it's clear he thinks his colleagues should also be speaking out, and I agree. Neil Oliver, Darren Grimes, for example, your brethren are dying out there. They're dying out there in that war zone, and they're dying for you. And you're not speaking out. Are you scared? Is that what it is? Where's your courage? Where's your solidarity? In these dark times, if you don't stand up, then that darkness will consume us all. And it does look, on your own terms, if we're going to be honest, a bit cowardly. But, it might be very amusing to watch this cesspit of hard-right ideology in a state of total meltdown. And I know we're all thinking, let's do a sweepstake, who's next? But I do think there are obviously important points to be made. In the run-up to the launch of GB News, we were told over and over again that a British Fox News was impossible. Our strict broadcasting rules simply would not allow it. Ofcom would stand in its way. Now, the key figure behind the launch of GB News at the time was Andrew Neil, the BBC's flagship political interviewer. His reputation, his credibility, whatever I think about him, was absolutely instrumental to its launch. And over again, randoms on Twitter were telling him it was just going to be another Fox News. And he basically spoke to them like they were just delusional thick people. So, for example, he posted before it was set up, for a channel that has yet to broadcast any output, people seem to know a lot about GB News, certainly more than me. But I'm just the chairman and primetime presenter. The British Fox News shtick is a predictable, tedious smear. But I guess as long as you're talking about us. Yeah, what an outrageous smear that one turned out to be, Andrew. Just these people on Twitter who made a prediction which, in the end, turned out to be completely and utterly vindicated. It was just a smear. He also said GB News will not, capitalised, be Fox News. But, of course, it suits you to claim it. We don't care. So he's double negative there. But, he's emphatic. He's like... he was not upset about that at the time, by the way. And anyone who thinks Andrew Neil ever loses his temper when he's challenged, well, I think that's another baseless smear. Now, some will go, don't be horrible to Andrew. He did, after all, swiftly depart the channel when it became a self-evident raging bin fire. But why is it that these random people on Twitter were able to see what GB News would inevitably become, and did become, not this seasoned journalist with decades of experience in the media? And does he not see how, given his reputation was critical to the launch of GB News, that this is his Frankenstein's monster? But as fun as it is to hold to account a man who, let's be honest here, is not exactly in line for the title of Mr. Humble 2023, what does it tell us about Ofcom that they've allowed to happen what we were told over and over again was impossible? Now, they might go, well, we've got 12 live investigations on the go at the moment as the channel. But, firstly, they've refused to investigate all sorts of things on that channel, which is absurd. But it's about the entire nature of the channel. It is Fox News. There is no meaningful difference between it and Fox News. Now, I'm not one to say, let's take it off the air. I know Adam Bolton, formerly of Sky News, has said that. Because when you start allowing the authorities the power to shut down media outlets and channels, that is a slippery slope, to say the least. Though I do support efforts to build and have an advertising boycott. Something which is part of a free society. There's no democratic right to force companies to tarnish their reputation by associating their brands with trash. And it is proving very successful, and I support it. Now, I personally do refuse to go on the channel. I've been asked to go on dozens of times. They have largely given up. I don't think they've asked me for a few weeks at least. Now, there is a debate on the left about this, because I know some of my close comrades, friends, have gone on, and their argument is, well, we need to reach people who, are outside of our bubble. I do try to do that. Obviously, I go on TV, and it's not like everyone watching Good Morning Britain or Jeremy Vine Show, all a bunch of dedicated lefties. I know that because I speak to the callers. But, you know, my fear is by going on, firstly, you end up being a punch bag in a culture war. You know, I think that would be more something that I would end up being more than maybe some of my other left-wing commentators. But also it enables them to go, well, we are balanced. Look, we've even got these massive lefties on. That's my fear, but we disagree. I'm not having a massive go at people who appear in it, but I'm not for me. But basically, the key point is a bunch of rich right-wingers set up a right-wing propaganda channel we were told was impossible, which is spreading poison, and nothing meaningful is being done about it, even as it rather amusingly implodes. And that, I think, is a critical point. Because clearly, you know, it's not like the right, however much they cosplay as victims all the time, they are sore winners, the British right. They have almost the entire British newspapers industry on their side. You know, I mean, the two main newspapers are the Sun and the Mail, whose politics are pretty similar to those of GB News. And then they've got the Telegraph and the Express. I mean, it just, you know, they're not underserved, are they? But, you know, one area where you were supposed to have some attempt to impose some form of impartiality, though I have repeatedly challenged the BBC on this, but that's for another video. But now you get, again, more right-wing propaganda, but this time in the broadcasting world, when we were told that was impossible. Tells you a lot, doesn't it? You got a load of money and you're right-wing, pretty much get away with anything in this country, as indeed they have. And the only thing standing in their way at the moment is they're just destroying themselves. And long may that continue. I'll be keeping an eye on it, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Do leave your comments. Do press like and subscribe. Keep the show on the road on patreon.com/owners84. We have our annual Conservative Party documentary coming out next Wednesday. I'll be going to Tory Party conference on Sunday, so I'll be looking forward to share that video with you, so keep an eye on that. And if you want us to do more of those videos, obviously patreon.com/owners84 is how we fund all of this, rather than whoever funds GB News.